are live according to the screen.
Yes.
So I'm Michael Martinez of Reflective Dynamics, and I'm here with Kent Yunk of Roaring Pajamas SEO. And this is I think our fourth week in a row where we've actually been able to hold on to the schedule of recording these videos. So how you doing, Kent?
I'm great, Michael. The weather's holding up, and a lot of activity here and around here because of the Super Bowl. So I'm just glad I'm not out in traffic. I did have to go see a client this last week and go to San Francisco, and there were a bunch of streets that were closed off that made getting in and out of the city interesting.
Yeah, Super Bowl reminds me of something that I'll try to remember to bring up. Kent, before we started recording, Kent and I were talking about today's SEO Theory newsletter, in which we had an article about how native advertising can affect or interact with or work with search engine optimization. Kent, why don't you just repeat word for word what you just said to me before we started?
Well, I think, yes. So I was really inspired whenever I see stories of great marketing thought leadership. I get inspired. And so when you brought up the story of how John Deere in the late 1800s, instead of reaching out with traditional advertorial type information, they created a magazine. And that magazine talked about modern farming techniques. And obviously, they used tractors in those modern farming techniques, and with the goal of inspiring people to make their farms more efficient, more productive through the use of modern farming equipment, i.e., tractors. And I forget exactly, but what was the time period that took place between distributing that?
They started publishing The Furrow, which is the name of the magazine, and it's still being published today. They started publishing it in 1895, and I found a statistic on the U.S. government website, which said that by 1930 there were over 930,000 tractors in use on U.S. farms. So in 35 years, they sold almost 1 million tractors just by distributing a free magazine. Plus a little extra marketing, I'm sure, after they were known.
Well, and they weren't all John Deere tractors, right? They were all.
They were. I'm sure once other companies saw what was going on, it was like with the automobile. Once Henry Ford solved the production problem and created an assembly line that could churn out cars in mass volume, other people came along and started their own car companies to do the same thing. So I'm sure they weren't all John Deere tractors.
Oh, but it was a huge market, and I think the ancillary story that's also part of the SEO Theory newsletter was the part where you talked about the railroads who basically provided loans to low interest loans to farmers.
So that they could buy farms, yeah.
So they had the ability to buy farms and buy what was needed to start those farms.
Yeah, once the railroads crossed, connected the East Coast and the West Coast of the United States, there was nobody living in between because it was so hard to get to those areas. Mm-hmm. The pioneers would go from the East Coast to the West Coast, but they didn't really stay in the middle. The railroads changed all that. They made it easy for people to move out into the middle of nowhere and to buy farms and to start towns. And the railroads were bringing in people and equipment and resources, raw materials that weren't available in those areas, and the farmers sold food to the railroads, and the railroads took the food to the East and West Coast. And so they created a market for their services, which is kind of what a lot of successful companies do today. But most companies that are trying to market on the internet don't think in terms of market. In fact, I've had a lot of business owners tell me, I don't want to market build. And most of them are not in business anymore. I mean, or their business hasn't really gone anywhere. So it's in terms of well, what the newsletter was talking about was native advertising. How you take native advertising, one form of native advertising, which is the hosted article that you produce for somebody else's website. And if you comply with government regulations and search engine guidelines, you're going to disclose that the article is an advertisement, and it's not going to have any search influencing links embedded in it. It might have links, but they're going to be no followed, or the content's going to be walled off in some section of the website that the crawlers can't get to. And so those links are just there for the visitors, not for anybody else. And so what you can do is you can take this concept and use it to market a new service. I've actually seen some companies do this, where they come out with a new product or new service, and they launch it with a native advertising campaign. And you can measure the return on investment by looking at what people search for after they become familiar with whatever it is that you just introduced. Native advertising does not have to be written articles. It could be videos, it could be pictures, it could be all sorts of stuff. And so there are marketers out there who are being very creative, and they are building markets. When you build the market, there is certainly a cost, an upfront cost, but you are the dominant player in that market for a long time, unless you just hand it over to somebody else. So I think that market building is probably the more productive long-term strategy for most kinds of products and services, but people they just don't want to do it.
Now, is that partly because of the cost of entry, or do you think that it's pure motivation, some amount of both?
So let's concede that it's a hit or miss proposition. Okay. If you're going to lose money, some people would prefer to lose money just trying to make sales rather than lose money by building a market. I mean, building a market means creating awareness, stimulating demand for the products and services. And if you invest money in creating awareness and stimulating demand, but you don't get any demand, then you're going to go out of business very quickly. Whereas if you just invest your money in advertising and salespeople who go out and do one-on-one, you'll probably get some contracts or whatever that will keep you afloat longer. It's all about cash flow, right? That's the business. What every business needs is cash flow. So how do you get those sales coming in, and as soon as possible, so that you stop burning through whatever it is that you're working off of in terms of your initial investment. But this is the classic startup problem. They go through all these different rounds of funding, and they end up with investors who own sometimes $50 to $100 million worth of company value, and the founders are usually shut out of all that process. They don't get a whole lot of money out of it necessarily, unless they can generate the sales early on. And then you do have some founders who go on to become big millionaires and billionaires. Most startups don't ever succeed, and I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that they're aftermarket startups. They're not market building startups. Twitter, I don't know if they were the first SMS texting service, but they were the one that built that market. And the others, there used to be like a dozen other companies like Twitter. They're all gone now, as far as I know. There's the Chinese one, Weibo or whatever it is. But they basically built that market, right?
Right.
So native advertising is a valuable tool for search engine optimization, because if you can get people to start searching on your brand sooner, then you've got a connection there that you can work on in order to get conversions, sales, whatever you want to call it. So we did kind of go on at length about that in the newsletter today.
Yeah, and it was good because it used really relevant, poignant examples of why it makes sense to take that approach.
Yeah, I mean, there are SEO tool vendors that pretty much follow this approach, and they're not. None of them are particularly spectacular experts in anything, in my opinion. But what they do is they create free tools, and they get people to sign up for those free tools, and then they upsell them into the professional, memberships or whatever, where they get more tools and more stuff. And so, that's market building. You're building a market for your tool. Nobody else is going to sell that tool. So there's only one place where the demand can go. And this is, of course, why a lot of people are trying to follow the software as a service model. SaaS is all about building markets that are exclusive. Of course, somebody else can come along and replicate your business model, but it's going to be hard for them to leech customers away from you. So it's got its pros and its cons.
I completely agree. So if we wanted to, if we had a local business, I'll give you an example. There's a local business who focuses on adapting bicycles to handicapped folks. And they recently did a blog article about a bike they built for someone who had no arms. This is a two-wheeled bike, right? So you got to get up on the bike and ride it. It's not like a trike where it's it's stable. You just sit on it and move, right?
Right.
So pretty interesting. So that's solving a problem that not very many people can solve. And what I thought I'd do is we could brainstorm ideas about how to do native advertising around that particular challenge, right? So they have a very specific skill set. They're not just selling, bikes on the street corner. They're making those bikes so that they work for people that probably would not otherwise ride a bike. Yeah. Would not be able to do something under their own power for that matter in some cases.
Yeah. I could see how a business like that could go national, maybe even international.
Yes.
They just have to build awareness for what they do, and then be able to deliver the product to people that are interested in it, regardless of wherever they are. So native advertising would be a great marketing channel for that kind of a business.
Right.
I concur.
So it's interesting. It's sort of that's another sort of interesting model where you could apply that, and not very many people would want to compete because it's a very hands-on, probably more labor intensive, right? It's not just following the money.
Well, I think knowledge and experience would also be requirements. So the barrier to entry is kind of it's higher than, say, opening a sandwich shop.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So I was curious, in your newsletter also, I'm always fascinated by the fact that there's a whole section of call outs that you do around security and around alerting folks that even the new malware products and things like that are not completely safe. In other words, there are hacks for those.
Yeah.
And I don't know, do you follow Krebs on security?
I'll occasionally check on them, but I don't follow that website, or I don't actually follow any particular website. I just do a lot of searches for the latest information. And a lot of the articles that I find, they'll lead me to other articles, other blogs. It's just when you're trying to canvass a broad selection of vulnerabilities that come up in everything, there's no one blog that's going to cover it all. So not even 3 or 4 or 5 blogs. There are websites, as you know from the links I share, that are about all they are is just about security. And so the security specialists can't cover all of the security topics. So it's hard for me to just follow anybody.
Right. But I have to say that, when I look at all of those call outs, I begin to wonder, what's the point, right, of trying to secure yourself against malware and hacks when there are so many vulnerabilities, whether it's in operating systems, whether it's in backends to software, whether it's in any WordPress host that you do.
Yeah, well, that's a conversation that's gone on for ages. Why fight the bad guys if the bad guys are all around you? Because you can carve out a little niche where there aren't any bad guys, or on those rare occasions when they come in, you still have the advantage. It's still about our quality of life, and as service providers, the reason why I include all that stuff in the newsletter is that we have a lot of SEO agencies that subscribe to it, and they have to be aware of the problems that crop up on people's websites. When somebody comes to you and says, "Well, I got a malware warning in Google. What am I going to do about it?" If you don't know anything about fixing a hacked website, you're going to lose a customer because they're going to have to go find somebody else who can help them. And so technical SEO, I think, has become far more important than it used to be, simply because, not only are people trying to manage crawl, they're also trying to manage malware and rogue crap and, everything else that goes along with the technical side of it. So why should we try and keep up with it? Because it's a threat to all of us. And the smartphone is the most hacked computing platform in history. I think there's no end of smartphone hacks, and everybody's going on about privacy on the internet because of Edward Snowden, and they have no clue as to just how unprivate everything has been, and will continue to be. And of course, I included something else in the newsletter about the HTTPS versus HTTP argument. There's we still have a problem with mixed content where websites that have converted over to HTTPS are still using HTTP resources, and that makes them virtually insecure. They're no safer than they were before they switched over to HTTPS. Web marketers need to be aware of this, because if they're participating in the conversation and they're trying to sell people on converting to HTTPS, they need to know what they're talking about. And anybody who says that you're making a website safer by switching over to HTTPS clearly doesn't know what they're talking about. We're not there yet. They're not safer, unless you control all the resources, which a small number of companies do. But as soon as you put something like AdSense on there, you don't. So that's just where all that is.
So what if you were going to advise let's just say a small company that's starting out, is there a process that you put in place? You'd say, look, if you're going to start a business, here are the things that you'd want to do online to sell a service or a widget. There's probably a process that you think about on a regular basis. Say, you're looking at a company online, or you're actually looking at a client. And from a process standpoint, you go, I probably wouldn't have done it like that. I probably would have done this first and then did this and this, right? So,
well, yeah, when I get those clients that are just starting out, and I don't get that many, I do ask them what their plan for creating awareness is. The experienced entrepreneurs, when they come to us, they already have some ideas in mind. They've hired an inexperienced sales guy, or they've got connections where they go and they negotiate early contracts. Something that gets the ball rolling by creating a relationship between the company and some core group of first customers, and then they depend in part on word of mouth, referrals. They look for referrals. So if somebody's starting up a company and they don't have that kind of a marketing channel in place, I talk to them about how are you going to create awareness for what you're selling? Because if you're not creating awareness, then you're totally dependent on organic SEO, which means you have to sit there and write blogs all day long. And of course, business owners don't have time to do that. Most of them don't have the confidence to do it. And to build awareness through a blog, it takes me 1 to 2 years, and that's if I blog every day. I know I've done it more than once, and so that's just not a plan that you can offer to the small business owner. They ask, they always ask, it's like, well, how does blogging help? Well, it helps by getting content out there, and random people find it, and some of them like you, and then they remember who you are, and you just gradually build that up, and that's a long, slow process. That's easier for an affiliate marketer to do that than it is for someone who's actually got their own products or services to sell. They need to be more aggressive in creating awareness for themselves. And I'm not talking about link building, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully
Right.
that's obvious. So yeah, I mean, my first goal with a new business is to figure out how they're going to create awareness.
And there are a lot of avenues for doing that, but yes, doing their own blogging is great, but it's very, very difficult to sustain that. You're right. So, but I think process-wise, it's super important, I think, for small businesses to not only understand that, but have a plan in place to execute on it. So, um, be able to do the reach out um, for building awareness, connecting with potential customers, whatever the networking process that they're going to go through. But certainly they need to have, a reasonably good online presence so that when somebody does hear about them and they
It's easy to
do a
find them.
search. Yeah. So certainly search and find them for their brand, but ideally you want them to be able to be found for what it is that they do as well, which is the whole point.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's that course, the fallback plan there is usually PPC, pay per click advertising, is a fast, clean way to create awareness in the right channels, but somebody has to manage that. And I guess the majority of web search marketing companies do make a lot of their money off of PPC, managing PPC campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
Randy and I have we have resisted. I mean, literally resisted taking on PPC clients. People will come to us and they'll say, "Well, have you ever done PPC? Can you do PPC?" We go, "Yeah, we've done it. We can do it. We're not the experts in it. Go find somebody else."
Right.
That's a full time job, and it's
Well, I get a fair amount of my referral leads from PPC people because they know I don't do it.
yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
It is, no question. So,
Well, what do you see that's new in marketing today? I mean, what new needs are you running into?
hmm. Well, I think the movement toward mobile, I think, is catching a lot of people off guard, right?
Yeah,
So I think everybody that is older and starting a business, they think basically what does the web experience have to look like on a computer, a laptop, a desktop box. They don't think, speaking natively, they don't think natively about how do I market my presence on a device that's only, uh, 3 inches by 4 inches, right?
yeah,
Um, that's a big challenge, and I think um, there's a huge movement right now toward people developing apps and promoting those apps instead of promoting their business or their brand online.
yeah,
So I think that is a huge movement away from sort of the traditional market spin, and how we've sort of been conditioned to both look at how marketing happens online and how it's going to evolve. I mean, I don't think platform-wise we're there yet, but there is certainly a huge movement toward mobile, and in some cases there's the concept of mobile first, which is thinking about what that experience is like first over you know getting a nice standard website.
yeah. Well, I think that the mobile marketplace is still in chaos because too few people know how to engage in it.
Agreed.
And the majority of those who do know how to engage in it are just doing it for themselves. They're not, there are very few, I guess what you could call ubiquity vendors in the mobile marketplace for whatever reason. It's if you don't have the expertise, if you can't hire somebody who has the expertise to create and maintain an app, then where do you go? There are not many Etsy-like services for the mobile market. Etsy being a general marketplace where you can go sell stuff. eBay is a general market. I mean, if you go search for companies like Etsy, companies like eBay, you can usually find a dozen examples of companies that are in business. But what's the equivalent for the mobile marketplace? And we're not talking about the Play Store or the Android App Store or anything like that. I mean, the Apple App Store. We're talking about companies that provide tools to retailers to create their own mobile apps. There are plenty of open source coding projects out there, but the small business person is not going to.
I completely agree. I mean, I think that's one of the challenges that a lot of small businesses, especially if they're selling a widget, are going to have, and that is, can they adapt to being mobile friendly, and can they do it using their website, yes or no, or is for them to be competitive, do they have to have an app that's downloadable and that people can use and interact with? And I think that's non-trivial. I think that's a huge sort of leap for business owners, and it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out, because that is a huge hurdle, and it's certainly a huge hurdle from a mindset perspective, as well as from a technology and implementation and a project management standpoint as well.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to see the entrance of a customizable app framework that you can take your website or your database and use it to populate the app. And then the app, there are application services on available now. And I tried to test some of them last year. The experience left me not very happy at all. They just don't, there are still a lot of technical hurdles that have to be overcome in order for someone who has no technical background to be able to use these services comfortably.
I would agree with that, but I think to that point, I think though it's something that's small, medium, and even large businesses, they have to take a look at this. They have to look at how the absence of an app or being mobile friendly, how that's going to affect their marketplace.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can take a website and make it mobile friendly, but mobile friendly really only means that it's going to load fast and everything fits on the screen. It's not really mobile user friendly.
Right.
Filling out forms is one of the biggest problems with mobile interfaces right now. And in order to save people the trouble of creating accounts, how many options do you have for using a shared account service? There are immense privacy and legal challenges involved in using some sort of a third-party platform. Companies like PayPal and Skrill and NetTeller, they're probably in a position to create mobile services that will take a huge burden off of merchants. Whether those guys step forward to do it or somebody else is going to do it, I don't know. But
right.
Eventually, I think the app marketplace is going to become more of a hodgepodge. You're going to see a lot of partnerships. That's how people are going to make it work. So you'll create a core app, and then you'll partner with other companies to come in and help you solve the technical problems that you don't have the resources to solve.
I would agree with that, and I think I think that sort of leads into maybe what we can talk about next week, which is what are some techniques for actually doing optimization from a search perspective for apps in particular.
Well, we'll try to remember that thought. So, It does look like we're coming up on 30 minutes here, and that's it's been an interesting discussion. Thanks for coming up with the topics. Just so people know, Kent usually does come up with the topics for these things. I'm usually like harebrained by the time I get to Friday afternoon. So,
well, you certainly primed the pump by sending out the newsletter, so that was helpful.
okay, well, thanks again. Thank you, everybody who's watching. Keep watching. We're going to continue to try and do this on a weekly basis, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.